You're having a perfectly normal day, feeling fine, and then someone says something, maybe it's just their tone, maybe it's a single word, and suddenly your entire mood flips like a switch. Your chest tightens, and you're sitting there thinking, why does this hurt so much when logically it shouldn't even matter? And you feel ridiculous because you know it's something small, but your body is reacting like someone just attacked you. And here's what's wild. This happens to all of us constantly, and we walk around thinking we're overreacting when actually there's a fascinating psychological reason why these tiny moments can feel like emotional grenades. So let me break this down, because once you understand what's really happening in your brain during these moments, everything changes. The truth is, your brain doesn't experience emotional pain the same way you think it does, and what seems like a small thing on the surface is actually triggering something way deeper that has nothing to do with the present moment. But before I explain that mechanism, you need to understand why your emotional responses are often completely disconnected from the size of the trigger. See, when someone dismisses what you're saying mid-sentence, or gives you that specific look, or forgets something you mentioned 3 times, your conscious mind is telling you it's not a big deal. Be mature, let it go. But simultaneously, there's this entire underground system in your brain that's screaming, danger, rejection, not safe. And that system is older, faster, and frankly, way more powerful than your logical thinking. Here's where it gets interesting. Your brain has this thing called the amygdala, which is basically your emotional alarm system, and it doesn't care about context or proportionality, it only cares about patterns. And when something in the present even slightly resembles a past hurt, that alarm starts blaring even if the current situation is objectively minor, which is why you can feel devastated by a comment that someone else would brush off in seconds. But here's what nobody tells you. The size of the trigger and the size of the pain are almost never proportional, because you're not actually reacting to what just happened, you're reacting to every time something similar happened before. It's like your emotional system has been keeping receipts without your permission. Now, let me tell you something that's going to sound uncomfortable, but is absolutely true. Most of the time, when something small hurts you deeply, it's because it's touching an unhealed wound you didn't even know was still there. And your brain is trying to protect you from feeling that original pain again by overreacting now, which seems counterproductive, but actually makes perfect sense from the survival perspective. Think about it this way. If you got bitten by a dog as a child, even a friendly dog approaching you years later might trigger anxiety. And your logical brain knows this dog is different, but your emotional brain doesn't care. It just remembers pain equals dog. So it activates the full defense system. And the exact same thing happens with emotional wounds, except we can't see them, so we judge ourselves for having them. And here's the kicker. The people who seem to overreact the most to small things are often the people who've been trained to minimize their feelings for years. So all those moments they swallowed their hurt and told themselves it wasn't a big deal, well, that pain doesn't just disappear, it accumulates like pressure in a bottle until eventually the smallest thing becomes the thing that makes everything explode. What's fascinating is that your body physically cannot tell the difference between emotional pain and physical pain. Neuroscience has shown that rejection, dismissal, and emotional hurt activate the same brain regions as actual physical injury. So when someone says you're being too sensitive, what they don't understand is that your brain is literally processing that small comment as if someone punched you, which is why it hurts so much, even though you know it shouldn't. But wait, there's another layer to this that's even more revealing. The reason small things hurt so much is often because they confirm a fear you've been carrying about yourself. Like, maybe you've always worried deep down that you're not important or not valued or easily forgotten, and then someone does something tiny that seems to prove that fear true, and suddenly it's not about the thing they did, it's about the terror of your worst belief about yourself being confirmed by external reality. This is what psychologists call a core wound, and everyone has at least one, usually formed in childhood or during formative experiences. And these wounds are like invisible buttons that people can accidentally press without knowing they're doing it. And when that button gets pressed, the pain is enormous because it connects to your fundamental sense of safety and worth. Now, here's what's crucial to understand. Recognizing that small things are triggering big wounds doesn't mean you're broken or damaged. It means you're human and you have an emotional history just like everyone else. And the goal isn't to stop having these reactions, but to understand what they're trying to tell you about what needs healing. Let me give you a real example. Imagine someone cancels plans with you last minute. Objectively, not a huge deal. People get busy, things come up. But if you have a history of feeling abandoned or being an afterthought, that cancellation isn't just about tonight's plans, it's about every time you felt left behind, every time someone chose something else over you, and your nervous system is responding to the pattern, not the incident. And here's something most people never realize. The intensity of your reaction is actually proportional to how much you're trying to avoid feeling something. Because when you push feelings down instead of processing them, they don't get smaller, they get more volatile. So the more you tell yourself you shouldn't be hurt by small things, the more hurt you actually become when they happen. It's this weird paradox where trying to be tough makes you more fragile. What really changes everything is when you stop judging yourself for being affected and start getting curious about what the pain is connected to. Because that small comment that ruined your day, it's not really about the comment, it's a messenger trying to show you where you're still carrying old hurt that needs attention. The people who seem unbothered by small things aren't actually less sensitive, they've just done the work of healing their core wounds so there are fewer buttons to press. And that's available to everyone, but it requires admitting that you have feelings that matter instead of pretending you're above it all. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you grew up in an environment where your feelings were dismissed, minimized, or punished, you learn to do that to yourself. And now when something hurts, your first instinct is to tell yourself you're being ridiculous instead of acknowledging that you're in pain. And that self-dismissal actually makes the pain worse and last longer because unacknowledged pain doesn't heal, it just waits for the next trigger. So what do you actually do with this information? First, when something small hurts, instead of immediately judging yourself, pause and ask what this reminds you of, because I guarantee you there's a connection to something earlier in your life, and just making that connection conscious often reduces the intensity because you're separating past from present. Second, understand that your sensitivity is not a weakness, it's actually data about what matters to you and where you still need healing. And the goal isn't to become numb or unbothered, it's to become aware so you can respond instead of react. Third, give yourself permission to feel hurt without needing to justify it to anyone. Because the weird thing is that when you stop fighting your feelings and just let yourself feel them, they usually pass much faster than when you're trying to logic your way out of them. And here's something nobody talks about. Sometimes small things hurt because your nervous system is already maxed out from stress, lack of sleep, or dealing with bigger things you haven't processed. So it's not that you're weak, it's that your emotional capacity is depleted and there's no buffer left, which means the solution isn't just healing old wounds, but also creating space to actually process current life. The real transformation happens when you realize that being hurt by small things doesn't make you broken, it makes you someone who feels deeply. And that capacity for deep feeling is the same capacity that allows you to experience deep joy, connection, and love. You can't selectively numb, so the sensitivity you judge yourself for is actually connected to your greatest strengths. What I want you to understand is that your pain is valid regardless of the size of the trigger, because you're not a robot who should only feel in proportion to objectively measurable events. You're a complex human with a history and emotions and nervous system that's trying its best to keep you safe, and sometimes that means overreacting to protect you from deeper hurts. The people who judge others for being too sensitive are usually people who are terrified of their own feelings and need everyone else to be numb so they can justify their own emotional avoidance. So don't let other people's discomfort with feelings convince you that yours are wrong. Here's the final piece that ties everything together. Healing doesn't mean you'll never be hurt by small things again. It means you'll understand what's happening when it occurs, you'll have compassion for yourself instead of judgment, and you'll be able to move through it faster because you're not adding layers of shame on top of the original pain. Remember, every single person you've ever met has some version of this where something objectively small triggers something subjectively enormous. And the only difference between people is whether they're aware of it and how they respond to it. And now that you know what's really happening, you can start responding with curiosity and compassion instead of confusion and self-criticism. Your feelings are not the problem, they're the pathway to understanding yourself more deeply. And that small thing that hurt you so much, it was never really about that thing at all. It was about something bigger asking to be seen and healed, and that's actually something worth paying attention to. So next time something small devastates you, instead of spiraling into shame about why you can't just get over it, take a breath and recognize that your emotional system is working exactly as it's designed to, which is to protect you by remembering patterns and trying to prevent future hurt. And the most powerful thing you can do is acknowledge what you're feeling, trace it back to what it's really about, and give yourself the compassion you deserve the first time you were hurt this way. This is just general awareness about how emotions work, not professional or medical advice, but understanding this pattern can genuinely change how you experience your own sensitivity. And maybe instead of seeing it as a problem to fix, you can start seeing it as information to learn from because you're not too much, you're not overreacting, you're just human, and that's exactly enough.